Lands Initiative will hopefully ultimately resolve. Excuse me. So to set the stage on where we're at now, I think it's important that we at least look back to where we've been. And the history of public lands in the state of Utah is nothing but conflict. There have been some successes, some minor successes, but if you ask anyone at this table, I would dare say that no one is happy with the status quo. If you're looking at what's going on public lands in the state of Utah from a development perspective.
So first off, just to orient us here is a map of the state of Utah, and in orange we're showing all of the federal public lands managed by the Bureau of Land Management. They have about 23 million acres out of Utah's 54 million acres. This is what really led to the creation of SUA. Many of these lands are spectacular, and long ago our group felt like they were not being properly addressed in public lands debates. There wasn't, and I think for the first time we really are seeing delegation staff willing to reach out and to listen to many of the stakeholders for these public lands. And this is very commendable. And I do want to make that very clear. The work they have done is extraordinary and impressive.
The amount of wilderness that the participating counties already agreed to in this bill collectively would make it the largest single wilderness enactment bill the state has ever seen. Smart public lands management involves not just raw designations of polygons. This is development, this is wilderness, this is this, this is that. But there are important details that go into this, and those details are being preserved and paid attention to, thankfully, by the delegation.
Great. We'll certainly get more perspectives in here soon, but I want to pause and ask both of the last two speakers, David and Mark, on the roads and the issue of county participation. Taking the roads first, Mark, you mentioned that these are in total extremely small number, and that's certainly believable. But isn't there some kind of a map and a process for identifying this is a road or that isn't a road? I mean, where do the roads that you showed us, David, stand in this process and identifying and clearing, if you will, the roads that are not a conflict?
Daggett County, why don't you give up these routes you claim, which totaled 9/10 of a mile? There weren't very many. Give up 9/10 of a mile, and part of this legislation, we agree, we will go hand in hand with you to Congress and say, Congress, you should recognize over 100 miles of routes that the county's claiming elsewhere, but let's give up these claims in proposed wilderness. So I think that the Public Lands Initiative is a great avenue for resolving this, because we have that ability to have those sorts of discussions.
We need a new paradigm in order for this to work. There's a reason why there have been land conflicts in Utah for 30, 40 years. I did pass out, and Drew asked me to mention this. There are maps that are on your table. You know, the reason why I thought these were important for you to see, most of you have probably seen these before, but in particular the one that shows the Utah Surface Land Ownership. You know, when I'm trying to be funny, and it's always dangerous when a policy guy tries to be funny, I'll say that this looks like a Jackson Pollock painting. Because it does. It's a mess. It's a mess of land management, and these lines, you know, sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. Sometimes where BLM ends and Forest Service begins, you know, there's a natural feature why that happens. A lot of times it doesn't.
Weeks ago, yesterday, when I landed at Reagan Airport, I heard the soundtrack for House of Cards. And I think that really captures the change in mood, the change in attitude. Since 9/11, we have had our politics based on fear. And in the West, the fear has been pointed towards the federal government, the government. That's the thing that just really drives people to vote. Having been director of BLM, I would predict that in another 40 years, when people come to visit central Utah, they'll be wanting to go to the Grand Staircase Escalante because it's been preserved as an open space with a view of nature that you can't get anywhere else. When you're down there now and you meet people from Asia and from Africa and from Europe, ask them why. The scenery is absolutely amazing.
I would touch on a few comments that have been made about the roads. one of the problems we have, and we've had in the past, and I hope we don't have in the future, is this, and I'm just going to say it, we are often disingenuous in the way we show what roads are roads and what roads aren't. I've recently moved to Salt Lake City, and I'm becoming a little bit of a city slicker. Obviously, I grew up in a rural community, and your perspective of what is a road when you grow up in Orangeville, Utah, versus downtown Salt Lake City is vastly different. I think when, 13th South was off-roading for me a little while ago, but coming from Orangeville, that's a beautiful highway. Highways are not all the same. I know that's a legal term, but some of these dirt tracks that we say are not highways, technically and legally are highways. Yeah, they're not I-15, but they are a path in which people have taken motor vehicles on. In many cases, there's been extensive mining across these lands that are now somewhat wilderness quality. Extensive mining, tremendous uranium mining in these areas. And nature, despite what some would like you to believe, is phenomenally resilient, and she comes back.